In 1989, I published my first book, which was about continuity and continuum. It was the base of my later studies as the kinematics of the brain activities. This presentation is the summary of the book. Uh, Understanding continuum as a third reality aspect other than object and movement or behavior of object is a little tricky, and because it will appear in very high brainwave frequency levels, it is difficult to understand, frankly speaking. Mind is lazy in nature and prefers to uh, think either in terms of wider space intervals as objects or in terms of longer time intervals as behaviors. Actually, mind follows the least time, least energy consumption law of thermodynamics. A very small space-time interval balance needs to consume higher kinematics. An ideal blend of space-time is never possible. Based on the above description of continuum, it has no center, no mass, and no move. It has floating boundaries limits to related field of object behavior variations. Beyond that limit, the continuum unit is not effective, but still may weakly continue. Uh, Consciousness is a significant example of a continuum. Human has an intensive consciousness depth compared to previous species in evolution tree. His consciousness is not limited to his brain. It covers the whole body as well as the surrounding. That communication is effective in some way. However, intensity and complexity of consciousness has tight relationship with density of connections. Even in the brain itself, consciousness differs according to density and shape of connectivity by axons, neurotransmitters, or any other type of media in different layers. Consciousness is a continuum that governs thoughts, emotions, instincts, reflexes. It connects needed inputs to motor outputs in general. All brain processes are made of space-time intervals in netted layers, from a chemical to electrical to electrochemical to magnetic to electromagnetic to straining fields. These are the different layers that base brain activities. All these space-time interval fields are tightly connected together in all directions. As much as the number of intervally connected layers would increase, consciousness quality and depth will also increase. Autonomic brain functions, imitations, instincts, emotions, and thoughts generate consciousness in different degrees. Consciousness has its highest level of degree in focused thoughts. Consciousness itself has different stages, including sensation, perception, cognition, decision making, and action. Each of these stages has different texture of netted layers of space-time intervals fabrics. What about dreaming? Dreaming has a texture of less net layers of space-time intervals than thinking. It excludes cognition, decision making, and action stages. The difference in non-activation of external outcoming processes that emerge in waking. There are absence. These mentioned stages are absent in sleep. Note space-time blending has different textures in different objects and different times. When space intervals will increase in texture, in space textures, continuum tends to appear as an object. When the time interval will increase in the textures, continuum tends to appear as a move, change, or behavior. Texture of space-time net layers in the brain has chemical, electrical, electrochemical, electromagnetic, and stress straining intervals. Any last layer that is supported by lower layers of space-time intervallic textures, and if the number of layers is more, the depth of the consciousness will be increases. Though sensation has less complicated textures than perception less than feeling, and feeling less than cognition. These processes connect input to outputs in less complicated networks of space-time intervallic textures. If the number of the layers are less, higher netted layers of space and temporal intervals will increase the depths of consciousness. In logic, as well as in mathematics, which their pattern is almost the pattern of the brain functioning. Two elements are very important: substitution. We can symbolize that by is, and transformation symbolized by beacon. These two items happens in two space and time dimensions. These functions are utilized by similar objects or move images. As told in the previous slide, in substitution, space intervals is increase in the texture of the space-time, and in transformation, time dimension is increased in the texture. Substitution is formulated by, for example, if A then B, no A, then we have B. This is one of the simplest logic equations. Another one is if I and B are equal to C, then the I and B are equal themselves. Equality in mathematics and being in balance in physics both utilize the same principles. A closed loop strain balance uh, in a location supports a strain package uh, appearing. We symbolize already them with A, B, or C, which refers to objects and substances and their images, of course, here. An open loop uh, strain streams uh, seeks a strain balance in a transformation process toward arriving in an equality and balance state. Uh, Emerging a move or which can be indicated here as behavior is seeking balance state, strain balance state in an open loop process. Find the lane of information and its follow are elements of consciousness. The neural assemblies, which are algorithmic memory units over the motor brain, blend these two elements together. There are information fields that connect static dynamic information in a non-verb texture. Static elements can be in shapes, signs, or figures. Dynamic elements are in different connection ways between those static elements. In its advanced state, Broca's area of the language system combines the elements in a speech and writing products. Language signs in language signs and grammar combination in Wernicke's area convey information as the combination of the elements. A connection between Broca's and Wernicke's areas conduct language information flows and language production follows the same regulation as the brain functions to form speech and writing with fine space time interval texture fabrication, which it happens, of course, in Wernicke's area. In general, the prefrontal cortex integrates the sense, perceived and felt information in the previous sections of the cortex or brain to produce concepts. Concept units are continuum units synthesized over the motor brain. We refer to that as deduction, but segregation of those synthesized elements decomposes to nouns and verb forms over the sensory domain. We refer them to induction. So deduction, induction, or the analysis and the synthesis of the concepts are together, they are complementary and complete cycles of the brain activities. A short-term memory will form by matching its noun and verb components uh, with similar long-term memory motifs on their stream beds. And by following a stepwise substitution transformation process, brain is a combined information inducing over the sensory brain and deducing over the motor brain system. The above mentioned functioning can be recognized by its advanced language, logic, and mathematics pathways, utilizing nouns, objects, numbers uh, from the sensory brain in algorithmic functions uh, over the motor brain to deduce outputs. Sometimes induction and deduction processes, which are complementary to each other, will approach a conflict balance state successfully and sometimes not. They may convert, divert, or do not connect at all. Wandering or not being able to conclude states of the mind are based on the above tendency of information synthesizing or not be able to do that. Stream balance is a continuum uh, of straining field emergence, and it is underlined by electromagnetic and electrochemical fields. The strain balance has a varying distribution over the cortex. Those present different types of consciousness in different sections of the cortex. Strain balance between brain strain carrier waves and inputs that normally submit radially to the cortex layers, the fourth layer of the cortex. The increased oscillations on the neural assemblies, and this strain balance normally happens after few to several cycles of the strain carrier waves, not in a single cycle. Different capacity for absorbing and resorbing of the strain energy in each location of the cortex in each time will maintain a strain balance from a very short allostatic state to very long period of hemostatic state. Brain seeks a strain balance after disturbance by an input, external or internal input, to a next temporary rest state. The rest state is the same as a balance state. Sustaining behaviors follow an attractor streamlines from finest molecular genes to longest axon connections between cortex areas. Attractor streamlines will expand to electrochemical and chemical fields in the smaller spaces and distances, and as large as they have effective influence on the location. The brain activity is presentation of all changes from an initial disturbance to a new strain balance state, the, or the cortex, where the time frame of approaching to a new strain balance affects the completion of that brain activity. If waves of stress straining all over the cortex causes waving of trails of synchronized firing groups, those trails of synchronized firings will back strain energy to be divided in pieces or fragments of information units as short-term or short-lasting period current memory. This happens as short memory over the uh, the sensory brain, and as working memory over the motor brain, but both of them are known as current memory unit, and they happen through the outer layer of the cortex. Long-lasting memories are consolidated as motifs over inner cortex layers. So the short-term memory components interact and produce additional longer information units as they interact with the longer term memory units as their stream beds. Current information will arrive over consciousness level if they be confirmed with some long-term information. For example, sensory inputs, immerse sensation as a type of consciousness. When it is confirmed with the long-term sensory memories. Current memories will be identified with signs and symbols that are in fractal structure of solid shape motifs in each cortex column. Sensation will transform to perception, perception to feeling, and then to cognition by going from the parietal to temporal and through the limbic system to prefrontal cortices. Those cognition products as concepts may seem very different from related sensory ones. In a vertical direction, getting far from neural firings to their synchronized patterns and curvatures, straining curvatures on their energy fields will result in consciousness to be abstracted from its very materialistic description to non-declarative level. This is the reason that non-declarative memories will consolidate over the prefrontal cortex, where declarative memories are located over the sensory brain. Concept recognition will grow from what and where to when and which, and later to how aspects. Current of the synchronized firings will be identified with signs and symbols along pathway locations through outer cortex layers. When stationary synchronous firing of activated stream bed happens over the inner cortex layers. There are different disturbed states of individual strain packages that form a regulated distribution pathway when they are approaching a strain balance state. There are different distribution icons in different physical scales, like Schwinger equation, which describes a scattering of quantum units in distribution ordering when they approach the balance state. A firing trail of synchronized activity in groups of the neurons as strain packages may seek a similar format over the parietal cortex. Other distribution pathways are defined by Fermi-Dirac, both Einstein and Maxwell-Boltzmann. May they also describe how the activity pathways may get order. They may give cliche idea for brain activity pathways, how they emerge to link strain packages in short-term and working memory shapes. Whenever varying stress straining curvatures and distribution is very localized, a strain package will recall its encoded information. Formation of strain packages can be exampled by formation of the energy layers in a closed loop of the orbitals in atoms. Whenever varying strain curvatures and distribution will disturb in an order by substituting of the short or working memory components according to the related long-term memory motifs, or activated long-term memory motive will create a pathway as it happens over the temporal cortex up to the entorhinal cortex, where portion of the strain carrier waves enter the hippocampal system. Whenever varying straining curvatures find their balance state in a closed streamlines, strain packages appear. Whenever varying straining curvatures is around the strain balance state, distribution will develop to a layout forming information like faces, shapes, addresses, which they are formed by relative regular streamlines over the middle temporal cortex according to the long-term memory motifs in the beta streams over the inner cortex layers. These streamlines, as the interaction of the short-term streamlines and long-term stream bits, have always an irregularity content, and by segregation of the regular strain energy streamlines and the randomness, the outgoing wave in the limbic system will distinct these two theme and emotion portions. A combination of the radial emotion inputs and circular themes, they develop a cognition procedure process over the prefrontal cortex, with the possible outcome of a motor action that goes to the motor area. Creation of image units needs supporting strain packages to form. Creation of a scene image, including static and dynamic the elements, they need strain packages to link together in a layout, forming a shape, sign, and symbolic component or symbolic components in a layout distribution. The created scene image will have a distance from a strain balance stage, and the entire or part of the scene tends to transform to arrive in a strain balance state. Producing of a concept is the result of such a strain balance approach over the prefrontal cortex, and the product will split to a probable output in the motor area and a feedback reflection to over the parietal cortex as a conceptual input. The brain tissues connectivity and their viscoelastic property under stress forces of inputs, either external or internal, and of course a combination of them will conduct strain energy streams of information flows in different scales and types of forms, in form of information units, information trays, and information dynamic, as well as concluding conceptual products. Connectivity configuration and their viscoelasticity properties are media for the occurrence of all this information, static, dynamic, kinematics, to arrive in a final, at least temporary strain equilibrium state in waking time, for arriving to a more permanent equilibrium state. It needs a longer term and mostly happens in the next sleep period, and sometimes few following sleeps nights. The graph in the left demonstrates the strain emergence in phasic diagram by introducing an input, and in the next stage going under processing in the middle, and in final stage arriving relative strain balance state. The related processes happens over the parietal medial stage in temporal and limbic system, and finally the last stage in the over the prefrontal cortex. Frequency and amplitude of the brainwave indicates the transformation and substitution processes. They will combine differently over the cortex sections. Similarly, frequency, amplitude in waking, relaxing and dreaming state, and finally during the sleep, deep sleep, are widely different. Conversion, diversion, and steady information of flows streamlines will result in different combination of the stream packages over different sections. Distinguish space and time intervals of image units over the sensory brain will combine as a space-time concepts over the prefrontal cortex in final stage. Strain potential well is the site for memory unit to consolidate. Strain distribution curvatures support mentation forming, and its dynamic support emergence of a short-term memory stream over the sensory brain. A complication of the strain distribution curvatures will continue over the motor brain that produces concepts as brain internal products. A boundary between concept and sensory memory units over the parietal cortex are almost separated, where they blend together in the short-term memory texture according to similarity of short-term memory components with the stream-bed long-term memory motifs. Stream packages by their connectivity configuration encode units of information. Maybe some of these explanation are repeating and seems boring, but it is only to remind to better grab the present slides explanations. Anyway, stream packages and their connecting trails, as well as their dynamics, seek an overall stream balance state. In a mathematical description, the dynamic changes should arrive in a concept product by approaching the stream balance. These changes will describe all the activity and intermediate products all along the pathway and compare the initiation stream packages and the conceptual products. Are there either similar or are around equivalent to each other? Memory motifs convey the messages of the stream packages and their linkage and dynamics when they are activated and recalled. Stream packages, their trains of linkage and dynamics are they are backed by the electrochemical, electromagnetic, straining fields in different connection layers. Again, we return back to continuum. And physics, phase space indicates all possible states of the occurring activities, and it is a concept which unifies static and dynamics with continuum fields. Therefore, to study continuity, phase space presentation is the most helpful. Sensation, perception, feeling, and cognition are continuity quantum fields, and it can be described in phasic spaces. A space presenting of them can be done in sign and language, or in shape and drawing, or sound and speech media. A base strain equilibrium state will be achieved in longer period, long in a daily sleep, provides a cumulative consciousness based on the entire long-term memory structure, which is or knowledge bank. A sensation, perception, feeling, and cognition each provides a partial consciousness that happens in different regions of the cortex. They are interacting strain fields and are based on straining curvatures in related cortex regions. Those dynamic topological presentation of brain activity from a disturbed strain field to its termination in different scales will demonstrate connectivity configuration changes as information units and their comprehensive and integrative information strain unit curvatures in packages convey changing sign or symbols or their combinations as meaningful information. Variation of the high dynamic changes of stress straining curvatures in waking to the low dynamic changes in deep sleep will have partial waking strain balance states for each activity and for the all activities during a period of the waking. It happens during the related sleep period, which memory building happens on that. An overall daily strain balance over the cortex will describe waking sleep activities relationship. This is a big subject which is called continuity theory in dream studies. Concepts will develop by extrapolation of topological continuum, topological curvatures as continuum along all these changes, and they consolidate new memory long-term memories. Most abstracted concepts that can be achieved by the brain are limited to highest dynamic states in straining temperatures during the highest brainwave frequencies. In short, continuum is a combination of spatial and temporal dimensions, or in dynamic term, regularity and irregularity of strain energy streamlines. Regularity and irregularity or randomness of the strain energy streamlines are referred as theme and emotion parts of the brain activity. They will advance in complexity as conceptual continuum in brain, of course, to the very high level. Concepts are created in the prefrontal long-term memory units that each has saved an algorithm or subcontinuum unit for functional processing. A continuum package will decompose to motor action over the motor area and conceptual units over the parietal cortex. Those diversion of the two static and dynamic elements of cognition in premotor area is complementary to the conversion of static and dynamic elements over the sensory brain, which they produce intermediate perception product. By time new conceptual and sensory inputs advance consciousness level and improving cognition and perception. It can be said that there's a straining continuum are always polarized in static and dynamic dimensions to some degree, higher over the sensory brain and lower over the motor brain. For example, cognition will polarize to signs and their symbolic meaning, or speech and its content, or motor action and its type of action. And study if subject of continuum is difficult to get it, and of course my skills are poor and not developed enough to describe it in a better way. Understanding of the continuum aspect in the brain is very important to understand brain functioning. I believe the studies of consciousness are still far away from a final word or a final definition, is because it is considered to be analyzed in a materialistic base, or which means either in static or dynamic domain, and it is not studied in a kinematic frame. Please do not forget to send your comments and questions to mos.dini@gmail.com, and thank you.